Hey everybody, what the flick? Grace, Jason, Alonso, we're shattered. The final episode, you mean all this time we could have been friends. I'm currently reading my first edition copy of Joan Crawford, My Way of Life. This was just delicious.
It was for sure delicious, and I think that, you know, when I was here last and I was wanting certain things from the show, I'm glad that I got my fill of everything I needed from Ryan Murphy, because he really tied this up in a really nice bow and really gave us the emotion that I was hoping I would see from this feud. Because the feuds they're emotional battles per se, and I mean we'll get into it, but there were just so many amazing moments that even now, I saw it twice today. I watched it twice. I watched it twice to make sure I was like wrapping my head around it, and it was stunning, stunning.
Well, you know, I mean, it goes back to the very first episode. Olivia de Havilland says, you know, feuds aren't about hate. Feuds are about love. You know, and
they're about pain.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, about pain. Sorry, forgive me. And yeah, so the way that this unfolds with the two of them and how, yeah, they, you know. The underlying thing of this show is like together they could have been so strong, but they just couldn't make that work for whatever reason, and as enemies they both suffered.
Yeah, I think that this finale made the right choices where they had to, because they didn't, after Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, as far as we know, they never hung out again. They weren't friends.
Yeah.
They didn't call each other, and so it would have been too much if you had actually placed them at a table and hashed it out and given people that maybe were unfamiliar with their stories that sort of catharsis. That's just not how it happened. And so I think that they were able to still convey that emotion that we did want, that sort of tying it up with a bow in a really neat way in the dream sequence, and also in seeing Bette reach out and not actually call Joan, but still you have that moment that you need to get from a show, because the truth is that Betty's life went on, and so did Joan's life, and I'm sure that they did think about each other, but they also had so much else that was sort of going on, a lot of other like trouble that was brewing within their lives.
I think also too, it made you question your own mortality. I was talking with Grace on camera about this, about just how they were growing older and the regret and dying. And when Joan and Bette played the game, that to me it was so powerful, because even though I mean I'm not nowhere near as old as they are in the show, but I related so well. You know, life is so short, and the choices we make have these ramifications that could follow us for a lifetime.
Sure.
And it was sad too that these two women who were brutally talented, how as much as I felt as if they hate each other so much, but they needed each other so much. You know, and it would have been beautiful for. I don't know.
Well, I mean, they make it clear that obviously much of Bette Davis's sort of latter-day shtick was her feud with Crawford. Like that was the thing that people wanted to talk about.
The roast,
It comes up in the roast. You know, she talks about if we make up now, I'll lose half my talk show engagements.
Yeah.
You know, and she ultimately says no to the documentary that we've been seeing, you know, shot throughout, because she's like, I don't want to just sit here and tell you cruel one-liners about Joan Crawford. You know, and so yeah, unfortunately, it's like once you have started that routine, it's hard to give it up, even if it starts taking a toll on you and on the other person.
And what's interesting that they handled as well is that when they sort of achieved in their later career cult status, Bette kind of leaned into that, and Joan didn't understand it and leaned away. And that's what really got me. I was crying at the end of it, is because you see that Joan Crawford, especially within the gay community, has this cult icon status for all of her flaws and all of her outbursts and all the outrageous things that we know that she did. She has these performances, whether it's Mildred Pierce or Autumn Leaves or whatever happened to Baby Jane, or Trog, which we got to see. I mean, she is an icon. She's an absolute icon. But you see her have this moment at the book signing that I think is really probably not far off from an encounter that she had, where you have an obviously, I mean, maybe he's straight, but let's just say that he's gay. And he basically says, I love this picture because they're two outsiders that are struggling to survive. And you see Joan say, what do you know about survival? Like, she didn't understand what was happening to her, which I think that Bette, towards the end of her life, did understand. She knew that she had like a gay cult following, and she liked it. She was like, cool, great.
And she lived long enough and was healthy enough so that toward the end of her career, like I remember she got the AFI, you know, Life Achievement Tribute, and she got all these sort of honorifics, and so and was around to enjoy them and around to sort of soak that in a little. And Joan didn't have that. I think it's true, like I say in the closing notes, a lot of the reevaluation of her career came after she died. But you're right, she also didn't quite get the space she occupied. And interestingly, I would argue that neither does Faye Dunaway.
That's exactly right. What did you think about the choice that they didn't even show Faye Dunaway?
Well, I mean, I think they probably couldn't, and B, they didn't have to. Like the idea that she made everybody wait on the set sort of spoke volumes. But like Faye Dunaway's performance in Mommy Dearest, I think as time goes by, more and more we realize that yes, it is sort of maybe ludicrous on its face, but there's my friend Sean Abley, who's a playwright, likes to say that she's giving an operatic performance.
Well, also,
almost literally, like she's going, Christopher, Christina, she's Maria Callas.
Barbara, please.
Exactly, yeah. And interestingly, Dunaway has been wanting to play Maria Callas in Masterclass, and so it's like it is an iconic bit of film acting, and she never wants to talk about it ever.
She doesn't, and she doesn't appreciate it. It's another thing that kind of goes over her head. I know I've talked to Ben before about apparently that's the one.
Yeah, you do not bring up Mommy Dearest around Faye Dunaway ever. Yeah.
What was I going to say about Faye Dunaway? I'm sorry, my thought just totally escaped me. I have so many thoughts and views.
Well, while you're on the train for that thought, one of the things that I really liked in the show too was the how Joan became so human towards the end with the kids playing. Normally she would have had a meltdown if kids were ruining her
scuffing the floors.
But she's like, no, let them be children. And then her connection with her adoptive daughter, and then at the table in the dream sequence where she said, I for my life I've put on airs for people, and I do not know who I am. It's funny that she would say that because I know stars now who feel the same way. Yeah. That that they feel that I've always been what people have wanted me to be, and I've lost sight of who I am. Throughout my life, and that's really hard to come to terms with. And Mamacita, there were so many moments in this show that again were very emotional for me too, Grace. But Mamacita giving her testimony in the documentary about all these people came to her funeral, hundreds of people, but no one was there for her when she really needed them. And to me that reverberated and was so intense for me to hear that. I agree, people do that. Michael Jackson, same thing.
That's such a Hollywood thing in general. Like people talked about how Spielberg spent millions to buy the remaining existing Rosebud sled in an auction, but he wouldn't give Orson Welles enough money to finish The Other Side of the Wind when he was still alive. Stuff like that. Yeah, I think that's the thing always where like we would much rather deal with dead celebrity icons than old celebrity icons, because when they're still around and they're still living, having to deal with the complicated nature of them still being around and wanting to work, and maybe they're difficult, but we just as soon sort of put them aside. And then when they're dead, we can come out and be like, oh God, they were so great, I love them so much, and and it's easier that way because you have to deal with the actual person.
Yeah, and I think just like having when the book Mommy Dearest came out, it was easier, I think, for a lot of people to believe that as the truth. Than it was to look back at the relationship that she had with her other children and other accounts of who she was as a mother. And that definitely sort of tainted her memory so soon after she died.
True.
It was the death of an icon, but it was also the death of a really crazy, maniacal woman. And only in, I would probably say within the past 5 or 10 years has the younger generation been able to look at her work and see it at face value. Like what she is a good actress. I mean, that line that she delivers in The Women, I'm blanking on, like, there's a name for women like you, and it's not
use a polite society outside of a kennel.
Outside of a kennel, she has these amazing performances that were absolutely, are tainted by sort of more recent portrayals of the caricature of Joan Crawford, and that is a testament to how great Jessica Lange has been.
I was just going to say, I think Jessica Lange's performance, especially in this final episode, which was just so heartbreaking from start to finish, I think goes a long way to kind of rehabilitating the public image of Joan Crawford. I mean, because yes, as time has gone by, more and more people have sort of pointed to Christina Crawford's account and said, that's kind of exaggerated, that's not the Joan I knew. Certainly her other, the Kathy and the other twins always said that was not what they had dealt with. Although even Joan admits that her mothering of the twins was different than dealing with Christopher and Christina.
It was a totally different time in her life.
And yeah, she had less time to devote to them, all that stuff. But nonetheless, I think that we're able to sort of get past that one tell-all and sort of reevaluate her as a human being and certainly as an actress.
Yeah. And it feels very sad that for so long we weren't, and that she did become sort of a caricature, and that's who I knew initially was Faye Dunaway's portrayal of her, which now I feel really good that we've revised that now with Jessica Lange just doing such an amazing performance from start to finish, especially in this finale episode. I think that this is what people will remember when they think of someone playing Joan Crawford, maybe sooner than they would think of Faye Dunaway.
I hope.
I don't know.
I mean, I think they both. I think they're allowed to coexist, but yeah. I think this certainly gives a much more human element, and it's God. There's so much here that to unpack. I mean, we could be here all afternoon, but I mean, like just those final interviews for the documentary, Victor Buono talking about Bette Davis's later career choices, and it's true. It's like one of the things that made her so great early on. The reason that she fought with Jack Warner all the time was because there were shitty scripts that she didn't want to do, and then after a certain point, it was like she clearly said yes to everything.
Everything, yeah.
You know, and so that I think diminished a lot of her sort of star appeal. And I was just thinking that's sort of interesting because like if you want to see, by the way, The Decorator, that pilot that she did for Aaron Spelling, it is on YouTube. You should watch it. It's kind of bananas to see Bette Davis try and be like do sitcom patter and rhythms. It's very strange.
And towards the end of her career, she did sort of lean into this preconceived idea that we had of her as like this biting, sort of bitchy older woman. We see that in Wicked Stepmother as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And for whatever performance is in of Wicked Stepmother.
Right. But yeah, no. She was definitely known for her sort of like unsparing sense of humor.
Towards the end of her life, but early on, you look at like Jezebel, and you look at, I mean, of course, the All About Eve, and it was this sort of underlying simmering sass that in her later career was just sort of it was a gimmick.
Yeah, she didn't play a lot of wilting flowers, but certainly as it got later, it became a little more shticky.
Yeah,
for sure.
shticky
for sure. How do we feel about the final scene where they show the conversation between the two? Where the makeup artist asks, "What really happened on that first day of filming?"
I believe it. I mean, a lot of the people who were complaining about some of the early episodes were like, well, I know somebody who's on that set, and they were always professional with each other. And it may well be that whatever things were happening, they were happening behind closed dressing room doors or, in conference with Bob Aldrich or whatever. And so I could see the two of them, again, ironically, before, Warner and Hedda Hopper and all those people got their digs in, I could see the two of them being like, we both need this. We have a shared history, let's make this thing work. And then it all kind of spinning out of control. So I thought that was a nice coda because again, I think a lot of the concern for this, especially given Ryan Murphy, being Ryan Murphy, was this just gonna be like a nonstop catfight and like bitch fest? And I think it really is this kind of tragedy of the catfight is tragedy. The catfight is like women who didn't necessarily want to be at odds with each other, but were kind of pushed there by outside forces because it benefited those outside forces. But the histories here are all so fascinating for anybody who is, if you're interested in this kind of like old Hollywood lore, like Jack Warner, a story I love after getting booted from the studio he helped to found as an independent producer, made the 1776 movie based on the Tony-winning Broadway play.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Me too, he produced that movie. But here's the thing, before it opened, he screened it at the White House for his dear friend Dick Nixon. And Nixon said, could you take out the cool considerate men number because it makes fun of conservatives? And they did. And it wasn't restored to like release prints and DVD until decades later.
Plays the violin. my dad used to show me that, why? I don't know.
I love that movie. But anyways, it's just, I mean, all of these people had interesting stuff, and Olivia de Havilland just like kind of went off to Paris and just did not give
she's just
a
over
shit
it.
About any of this,
Interesting choice that they didn't age Catherine Zeta-Jones at all.
No.
I mean, they were like, this is, Olivia de Havilland is eternal. She will outlive us all. And so she's always going to look like this.
She was one of my favorite reinterpretations in this show. Also the memoriam. How that was another powerful scene where even people who kind of were adversaries of Joan were just like, well, that's it.
That's all you get.
Let's raise a glass for her. You know, very sad. I'm glad Ryan Murphy made the choices he made. He spoke about choices and making this end on such a dark and somber note, because I would have been a little remiss and disappointed if it was happy or the girls or those two women ended up just parting ways, but there was no real definitive ending. The sadness and the tragedy for me was what really sealed the deal as a great piece of work for this series for Ryan Murphy, and I think that I'm looking forward to the next ones. I think the next ones are going to be fantastic.
It's going to be hard to top.
But yeah, they definitely are out of the game. The same with American Crime Story. Like you know, People vs. OJ was so great. It's like, how do you top that? But yeah, I think this one there is this sort of real underlying tragedy. I think the idea of, had they been friends, like how much that would have benefited them later in lives when they both needed somebody to be there for them. You know, I love the line where. Paul, who was Aldridge's assistant, the sort of compositor. Pauline says, "Is your grandmother still alive?" Call her.
Yeah. For me, it resonated because you grow away from your family, you grow away from the people who you need, and we're all human. We all need someone. We all go through tragedy, especially in this industry. It's so tough, and I can only imagine. I mean, in 2017, being a gay black male or of the LGBT community in this industry is a struggle. But imagine back then how the struggle, how intense the struggle must have been. So I mean, and good for Pauline to go on and find career in documentary versus not being able to work in motion picture, because that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to direct, and she found this whole new life in documentary.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, there were more opportunities for women, and you look back at that era, and you do see a lot more women's names as directors of doc films than we're getting to do narrative features. Certainly, studio narrative features at the time. So yeah, this was tremendous. My hat is off. I was just really. It was moving and funny, and I think really ultimately championed the work of these women, but at the same time, really talked about what they had to fight against in the system that was just out to kind of keep them in their place and knock them down. And so, I know, I mean, Murphy, we keep saying his name like he's the sole creator, but obviously there were
on camera too.
I know Tim Minear was very involved, and I think half the episodes were directed by women, so he is putting his money where his mouth is when we talked about the whole subplot about Pauline and women in Hollywood. Apparently I just saw some headline, he's starting some initiative where like on all of his shows now, I think he wants at least half of the directors to be women. So,
that's awesome.
So good for him, good for everybody involved with Feud, the actors, the writers, all exceptional. And thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.